If you love this show, if you love Legion, if you love superpowers, if you love science fiction and psychological thriller with some dabble of horror, you will love to read this book, Rain, published and written by yours truly, T. Outlaw. It is a science fiction psychological thriller, and yeah, it's about a guy named Joseph who ends up in this psych ward, and he's trying to figure out what's going on in the psych ward and how he can get out of there. And they end up, him and his friends ends up meeting a counselor named John Smith who tries to help them with their abilities and with their issues, which they think are mental issues, but not really mental issues, borderline. And some of them, he finds out that some of them have abilities. If you love Legion, like I said, if you love X-Men, you'll love this because it's a mixture of all those things, and it's just great. So if you would like this book, link is in the description box below to get a copy. Get into Legion Chapter 4. Chapter 4 Legion, it's getting real good each episode. So in the intro we have this random guy talking who I find out later on in the episode that his name is Oliver, and he's telling us a story about violence. That he lives in an ice cube and that everything around him is surrounded in plastic. So pause that right now. That kind of reminds me of X-Men, where Magneto is surrounded by plastic because anything else that has metal in it or matter in it, he can move and he can break out wherever he's at. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That reminds me of Magneto. So it raises the question: is does he have the power like Magneto? What if that's like low-key David, like an older version, but it's like, then again, that's Melanie's old fling or her love, because she calls him her love in one of the more forwarded scenes. So I don't know. So David is in a coma, and Sydney and Memory Guy are told by Melanie and the other girl who lives inside of the scientist guy's body. They actually go out and they try to find out things about David's past so that they can try to figure out how they can help David. They end up finding this tape recorder that is broken and beat up in the closet, and they touch it. Memory Guy touches it with Sydney, and they go into one of Adam's memories where he's with that therapist. And we find out that David killed his therapist. His therapist is laid out on the floor, blood everywhere, just dead. And Sydney says a question. She raises the question of, is this real or is this not real? What's real? What's not real? That question kind of lingers throughout the episode, actually, because she's the narrator of the episode, and she just keeps bringing that up. And you're thinking to yourself as you're watching it, like, is this real? What's real and what's not real? The whole theme of the episode is what's real and what's not real. Sydney says, who are we besides the stories we tell ourselves? And you're like, Then it cuts to the scene of David's sister Amy, who is actually trapped inside this room, and she's like right next door to her, of course it's separated by a thick cement wall, is David's old doctor. And she tells this story about this dog that David used to talk about, and she was like, but we never had a dog. Hold that right quick. It cuts to a scene of Melanie and the scientist guy who's they see Oliver in like there's apparently this guy named Oliver, the one I was talking about in the beginning, but he's wearing like this suit, this like water suit, and it reveals that Melanie had some sort of connection with him because she calls him my love, like I mentioned before, and she constantly sees him. She sees like this spiritual image of him, and she said it's because David's in a coma. So there has to be a connection there between Oliver and David in some sort. David actually ends up meeting Oliver in like his mind in some sort of way, and he leads him inside of the cube that Oliver was in, takes off his suit, reveals that he's Oliver. Of course, David has no idea who he is, and he's like, what's going on? And apparently Oliver knows everything that's going on in David's life, and it's like, is this dude psychic? Or is he low-key maybe David? They have some deep connection. Like, what's going on here? Like, what's going on? Oliver basically tells David, you're in an astral plane, and it's so deep. It's so deep that it's basically not real. And David's like, I gotta get out of here. He finally lets David out. Oliver lets David out, but he tells him before he leaves that it's not real unless you make it real. And you're like, so basically you're in control of everything. Everything that you see, everything that you do, you're in control of it. It's not real unless you make it real. And you're just like, what? So it rattles your mind a bit of like, okay, he's schizophrenic and he thinks that this is real and this is not real. It's all in his head, basically. This whole scenario could all be in his head for all we know. And he also mentions about David's monster, the yellow-eyed blob. He says that it's hunting you. And David's in denial. And he's like, Oliver tells him, it must have erased your memory. You can't remember. You've seen this thing hunt you, and you see it, and then suddenly it disappears. And David's kind of in denial. So then it jumps to the scene of Sydney and Memory Guy actually go searching for David's ex, because like I said, they're trying to figure out different things from David's past to put pieces together. So they go see his ex. And she sells homes of some sort, so Memory Guy acts like he's this blind guy, but at the whole time he's sitting there with his glasses on, and he's just scanning her, and I'm like, this is so cool. And he's looking into her memories. He sees memories of the arguments between David and her. He sees when Lenny was there and they were smoking. He sees the memory of David, his therapist, and his ex-girlfriend sitting down at the table, and his ex-girlfriend brings up something that is so important, I feel. She brings up something so important to this entire episode. She says to the therapist, David used to have this dog. He always talks about this dog, and David like chuckles and is like, yeah, this dog. And she's like, but he doesn't have any pictures of the dog. He also doesn't have any pictures from his old life. It's almost as if it never existed. And you have to think about the sister, Amy, when she was telling the story to David's old doctor about the dog, she said that they never had a dog. So the dog is made up. David made that up. And it makes you think, what else did he make up? He made up everything, his whole life, who he is, his existence. It just gets deep and deep and deep. So many questions are starting to surface. It's like, she's saying that he has no evidence from his past. And it's almost like, okay, who is David? For real, for real. Is it even real? And then it makes me go back to like Oliver, and I'm like, David and Oliver, what if they're like the same person? And Oliver's just in there creating scenarios in his mind and stories. That's why he knows David's life. And it's just so much you could speculate on, really. Before leaving, Sydney asks David's ex-girlfriend, you look familiar. Do you know David? Did you know David? And she was like, she tells him the story that, yeah, we broke up. We used to be together. We broke up because of his habits, and he was allowing his friend Benny to negatively basically influence his life with the whole drug incident. And we learn that Benny and Lenny are actually the same person. So this whole time, Lenny is this chick who has some sort of mental issues, whom David's been friends with for a very long time. And then we learn, wait, so Benny is Lenny. So Lenny is really this guy, this big guy. And it's not really Lenny. Lenny's real name is Benny. And you're like, whoa. Like, something really important that she said before they left. She said, tell him if you see him that they are watching. And it's like, a part of her definitely had to believe things that he was saying. A part of her was so connected to David that she had to believe some of the things that she was saying. She had to believe that maybe people were watching him. Maybe he did something else was going on deeper, because she was like, people, they're watching. And it's like, who are the people? The government people? I don't know. The girl that lives inside of that scientist guy, Memory Guy, and Sydney, they go to David's therapist. and which is strange. I said that they killed David's therapist, but I think he just injured him and made him blind of some sort. Because there was a scene, now I'm getting things confused. Yeah, there was a scene where they showed David's therapist bleeding on the floor, but it's like, how can he be dead if they're gonna go see him? So I'm thinking he didn't kill him at that part. He just injured him of some sort. I don't know. But they end up at his therapist's house. And his therapist is kind of like hesitant at first, but he lets them in. They sit down, drink tea. He says, I want to see David. Take me to David. I want to go see him. And memory guy is kind of like, he looks at Sydney. He's like, nah, we not doing that. And then the therapist is like, oh, so he's in charge. And Sydney's like, oh, no one's in charge. Like, we can help. Like, she's insinuating that they might help him and let this happen. And memory guy's just not having it. He's like, no. And next thing you know, the girl who lives inside of the scientist guy's body, right after the therapist says, you guys know this lady Melanie, right? And everybody's like, what? The girl looks out the window, and then she sees that it's a setup, and there's like a whole SWAT outside, and the therapist turns into the guy in episode 1, who was chiseling away at the piece, the wood dog that he was making. He turns into him, also aka the guy who was holding David's sister Amy hostage. And they run upstairs, and everything starts to go in slow-mo. The music starts to play. It cuts to the scene of Oliver dancing. Then it cuts back to the scene of Melanie just mourning, I believe, over Oliver's frozen body, or her memories of him, some sort. The scene of the fight. So the memory guy tries to attempt to fight the one blind-eyed guy, and he touches him and he faints. And the girl's outside fighting, and the one-eyed blind guy actually meets Sydney, and he's like, we've been looking for you. And she's like, that was a bad move. She puts her hand out, their hands touch, and you know what happens when she touches people. She swaps. So she becomes the guy, he becomes her, and she tells the people, yeah, I got them now. I'm going to take them in custody myself. It jumps to the scene of Lenny, and Lenny, who's actually Benny, but I'm not sure that David knows this yet. Lenny shows up in David's mind of some sort, or his consciousness, and she tells him, like, okay, we gotta get out of here. And he's like, who are you? You're supposed to be my friend. Who are you really? And she's like, I'm you. I'm me. I'm everything you want to be. Like, which was funny, but like, it kind of makes sense. It's like, she's really a part of him in his mind. So sometimes she's Lenny, sometimes she's Benny, but she's actually him, because he subconsciously, he basically made her. Meaning she's not real. So she tells him, like, we got to get out of here. I'm you. I'm attached to you. So you're stuck here. That means that I'm stuck here. And she shows him this clip of Sydney about to get stabbed. And she says, get angry. Get really angry and get us out of here. And he gets so mad that, like, gets them out of his mind and puts them in the place where Sydney is. So he finds Sydney where he finds what he thinks is Sydney, but remember, Sydney swapped bodies with the blind-eyed guy. So he thinks that he's helping Sydney, but in fact he's not. And then he finds out that, oh snap, this is not even Sydney. And once he finds out that Sydney swapped bodies and she swaps back, the guy has already pulled the trigger. But luckily, they were saved by the girl who lives inside the scientist's body, and she actually gets shot. And of course, she gets shot. The scientist gets shot. And that was the end of that episode, and I enjoyed that episode. And I can't wait to watch the next one. I believe I've seen the next one, so I can't wait to review the next one. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and comment below, let me know your thoughts about the video, and peace out.